For as the light of the morning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, and covereth the whole earth, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Therefore sanctify yourselves, that your minds become single to God, and the days will come that you shall see him. For he will unveil his face unto you, and it shall be in his own time, and in his own way, and according to his own will. This is Unveiling Jesus Christ.
Hello and welcome to this podcast on Unveiling Jesus Christ. I'm John Cassanet, and my last several podcasts have been devoted to the spirit creations of God the Father in His generation. My most recent podcast narrowed down that discussion to His creation of spirit worlds in their descending order of intelligence, beginning with worlds destined to become part of the celestial kingdom. So I refer to them as celestial spirit worlds. These worlds are to become worlds that are habitable by mortal humans that fill the measure of their creation by living celestial law. Since there is an order of creation and a hierarchy among spirit worlds, there was a first celestial spirit world that God created from the most intelligent spirit matter in its class. This first world of spirit is the subject of my podcast today. For the nutshell version of this podcast, you can check out section 188 in my book that you can find on my website at unveilingjesuschrist.com. Our discussion of the first spirit world created by God begins with Facsimile 2 in the book of Abraham. If you look in the book of Abraham, you can find this facsimile and its related explanations between chapters 3 and 4. The facsimile looks like a round disc with Egyptian hieroglyphic symbols around the outside edge. On the interior of the facsimile, symbols on the top of the disc are upright and symbols at the bottom of the disc are upside down. So if you rotate the facsimile 180 degrees, the symbols at the top would still be upright and the symbols at the bottom would still be upside down. This kind of begs the question of what is the actual top of the facsimile and what is the bottom. But you know, it's been in its current form in the Book of Abraham since it was first published in the Times and Seasons in 1842, so I just hope they got it right back then when it was first published, and we haven't been looking at it upside down ever since then. So this circular facsimile is a reproduction of an Egyptian hypocephalus. This word means under the head, as explained by Robert Millet, saying, facsimile number 2 appears in the book of Abraham as a modified restoration of a damaged hypocephalus, originally composed at Thebes sometime during the 30th dynasty of 380 to 343 BC. The term for these documents originated with the great Champollion, the foremost of the Rosetta Stone interpreters, who named them from the practice of placing the document under the head of the deceased, as is required in chapter 162 of the Book of the Dead. The components of the word hypocephalus consist of the prefix hypo, meaning under, and the suffix cephalus, meaning head. Close quote. The Encyclopedia of Mormonism further explains that this hypocephalus, a round papyrus placed under the head of a mummy by the Egyptians, is a richly symbolic expression of the deceased person's desire for resurrection, eternal life, procreation, dominion, and stability. Over 100 such hypocephali are known, first appearing during the Sate dynasty between 663 and 525 BC. Their stated purpose was to keep the body warm, in other words, ready for resurrection, and to transform the deceased into a god in the hereafter. Close quote. This particular hypocephalus identifies Kolob as the first spirit world created by God the Father during the spirit creation in His generation. We know this from Joseph Smith's explanation of the hieroglyphic symbols. There are 11 explanations for various symbols. Thus, in the center of the hypocephalus, number 1 is added to the facsimile, and on the next page in the Book of Abraham, you find the corresponding explanation. Since most of us seem to be reading our scriptures on our phones in today's world of technology, I'm not sure it's helpful for me to say that the explanations are on the next page. So if you're on your phone and looking at the facsimile, then I should probably say that you can find the explanations on the next screen. In any event, Joseph Smith explains figure 1 in the center of the hypocephalus. This figure shows a two-headed deity with two heads positioned on two back-to-back bodies that are sitting with their feet pulled up close in so that their knees are at the chest. Robert Millet tells us that, with rare exception, this deity is always portrayed with four heads. D. Horak concurred with Champollion's notion that this four-headed deity represents Geb, the earth, Shu, air, Ra, fire, and Osiris, water, the primary or first elements of creation. Close quote. Since I've already told you in prior podcasts that Kolob is the spirit world within this earth, the image of a four-headed deity that represents the earth, air, fire, and water in Joseph's explanations is entirely compatible with the explanations offered by Egyptologists. Joseph's complete explanation for figure 1 states that the image is, quote, Kolob, signifying the first creation, nearest to the celestial or the residence of God, first in government, the last pertaining to the measurement of time, the measurement according to celestial time, which celestial time signifies 1 day to a cubit. 1 day on Kolob is equal to 1,000 years according to measurement of this earth, which is called by the Egyptians Ja-o-e. Close quote. Joseph Smith's explanation of this symbol differs from the interpretation that trained Egyptologists will give for this particular symbol, as explained by H. Donnell Peterson, saying, the Egyptian perception of this figure in Facsimile 2 is that he is the two-bodied, four-faced Khnum-Ra, combining the features of the sun god Ra with the great creator of all things, Khnum. Close quote. Robert Millet tells us why this is the case, saying, the explanation given by the prophet for the figures in the facsimile are not translations of an Egyptian text, but are possible interpretations of ideographic signs. An ideogram is a sign or figure that represents an idea or concept. They are usually quite flexible and can be interpreted in a variety of ways, depending on the context in which they are placed. The prophet did interpret appropriately 9 of the 11 or so ideographic groups of signs on the facsimile. A comparison of the original meaning of the hypocephalus illustrations with the facsimile explanation demonstrates that every explanation made by Joseph Smith is both a possible and a reasonable interpretation, well within the broad scope of possible meanings for each ideogram, while conveying a meaning uniquely suited to the Book of Abraham and its revealed message. Close quote. In other words, Joseph Smith provided an inspired explanation for some of these ideographic signs or symbols in this hypocephalus, but I emphasize that these inspired explanations of gospel truth came by revelation. Joseph Smith did not translate the Egyptian symbols, characters, and hieroglyphics directly from the facsimile, as we are also told by H. Donnell Peterson, saying, Chapter 162 of the Book of the Dead contains the formula for its, the hypocephalus, construction and the expectations that should arise from its proper use. Although the Book of the Dead requires the formula to be written on a piece of new papyrus, the surviving examples were made like a brass bowl or keppa hat that fit on the back of the head, or of linen stiffened with plaster. Since white ants loved to feast upon the grain that was used to make the plaster, many of these documents have been damaged and missing portions. The Joseph Smith hypocephalus is no exception. Damaged parts were restored by Joseph Smith or under his direction. Some of the restored portions were interpreted by the prophet and some were not. When he was inspired to know the meaning of figures in various hemispheres of the hypocephalus, he gave an interpretation. Such interpretations are profound evidence that he received divine guidance and information from the Lord of heaven." Close quote. The image found in the center of Facsimile 2, Figure 1, shows a two-headed deity which Joseph Smith identified as Kolob, signifying the first creation, nearest to the celestial or the residence of God. This should be read together with Abraham chapter 3, verses 2 to 3, 9, 13, and 16, which say, "And I saw the stars, that they were very great, and that one of them was nearest unto the throne of God. And there were many great ones which were near unto it. And the Lord said unto me, These are the governing ones, and the name of the great one is Kolob, because it is near unto me, which Kolob is set nigh unto the throne of God. Kolob, which is star, Kokobim, which signifies stars, or all the great lights which were in the firmament of heaven. If two things exist, and there be one above the other, there shall be greater things above them. Therefore, Kolob is the greatest of all the Kokobim that thou hast seen, because it is nearest unto me." Close quote. Needless to say, Facsimile 2 and the contents in Abraham chapter 3 indicate that Abraham was very knowledgeable about Kolob and all the other stars and planets that became part of God's creations. Abraham 1:31 states, "A knowledge of the beginning of the creation, and also of the planets, and of the stars, as they were made known unto the fathers, have I kept even unto this day." Close quote. John Taylor said, "The Lord himself instructed Abraham in things pertaining to this and other worlds, and that he in his day possessed more light and intelligence on the principles alluded to than all the combined wisdom of the world today." Close quote. Joseph Fielding Smith explains in more detail the knowledge possessed by Abraham, saying, "By means of the Urim and Thummim, Abraham had revealed to him many great secrets concerning the governing planets in our universe. Not only did he discover this by the Urim and Thummim, but the Lord talked with him in a personal appearance. The Lord showed to him the stars, and among them many that were very great. These were great not only in size, but also in their importance as governing worlds. Among these, one named Kolob was revealed as the great governing star of our universe." Close quote. As the great governing star of the universe, Kolob was also the first world of spirit organized by God the Father during the spirit creation. I explained the spirit creation in great detail during my podcast on September 16 of 2025. I hasten to add that Kolob was not the first physical world organized by Jehovah. And sometimes this may not be completely clear in Abraham chapter 3 or in Facsimile 2. It talks about it being the first in creation, but doesn't specifically say spirit creation as opposed to physical creation. So allow me to explain why Kolob was the first world of the spirit creation as opposed to the first world of the physical creation. First, Facsimile 2 is an integral part of Abraham chapter 3, which describes premortality before the physical creation described in Abraham chapter 4. This is confirmed by H. Donnell Peterson saying, "The premortal life, perhaps the best statement in the standard works on this subject, is recorded in Abraham 3." Close quote. So it's self-obvious that Abraham chapter 3 discusses the premortal existence because it describes the eternal and uncreated intelligence that existed even before the spirit creation, saying in Abraham 3, verse 18, that, "Howbeit, that he made the greater star, as also, if there be two spirits, and one shall be more intelligent than the other, Yet these two spirits, notwithstanding one is more intelligent than the other, have no beginning. They existed before. They shall have no end. They shall exist after, for they are gnolum, or eternal." Close quote. Abraham 3:22 also describes the birth of God's spirit children called intelligences as part of the spirit creation, saying, "The Lord had shown unto me, Abraham, the intelligences that were organized before the world was, and among all these there were many of the noble and great ones. And God saw these souls that they were good. And he stood in the midst of them and said, These I will make my rulers. For he stood among those that were spirits, and he saw that they were good." Close quote. We can also thank Abraham 3, verses 24 to 25 for our knowledge of the grand council in heaven, when the Father presented the plan of salvation to his children on Kolob, saying, "And there stood one among them that was like unto God, and he said unto those who were with him, We will go down, for there is space there, and we will take of these materials, and we will make an earth whereon these may dwell. And we will prove them herewith to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them." Close quote. We also learn about the big premortal showdown between God the Father and Lucifer during the Grand Council after the Father had selected Jehovah to be the Redeemer. Abraham 3:28 tells us that the second was angry and kept not his first estate, and at that day many followed after him. Close quote. All the scriptures in Abraham chapter 3 clearly describe events during the premortal existence. Therefore, to interpret the first creation in Facsimile 2 as the first physical creation would be completely out of context and inconsistent with the entire content of Abraham chapter 3. The book of Abraham doesn't describe the physical creation of the earth until Abraham chapter 4, as mentioned a moment ago, which Hiram Andrus confirms, saying, with specific reference to the creation of the physical earth, a revelation declared that God made the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he finished his work and sanctified it, quoting Doctrine and Covenants 77:12. These 6 days of creation are those mentioned in Genesis 1, Moses 2, and Abraham 4. The statements found in these chapters, therefore, are concerned with the creation of the physical earth, not the previous spirit creation. Close quote. Finally, Hiram Andrus identifies several statements made in a document that Joseph Smith called Egyptian Alphabet and Grammar, and which he created during the Ohio period of the church. In this document, under the heading of Kolob, it states, among other things, Kolob is the eldest of all the stars, or the first beginning to the bodies of this creation. In other words, this stellar system. Close quote. So I have a second reason for saying that Kolob was the first world of the spirit creation as opposed to the physical creation, because the explanation of figure 1 in Facsimile 2 identifies Kolob as the first in government. H. Donnell Peterson has said that the prophet wrote during this study that 2 prophets, Methuselah and Abraham, had been invited by the Lord to see things relative to the planetary system that no other prophets had been allowed to know. An entry in the Egyptian alphabet and grammar under Kolob in the first degree reads, "It signifies the first great governing fixed star, which is the furthest that has ever been discovered by the fathers, which was discovered by Methuselah and also by Abraham." Close quote. In addition to being the first in government, Kolob is also described as a great governing star in Abraham 3, verses 2 to 3, saying, "Abraham saw the stars, that they were very great, and the name of the great one is Kolob. I have set this one to govern all those which belong to the same order as that upon which thou standest." Close quote. These words must describe Kolob's premortal status after its spirit creation and before its physical creation, when Kolob was a source of governing light or law. How do we know that Kolob was a source of light? Because Abraham 3 verses 13 and 16 state, "And the Lord said unto me, Kokobim, which signifies stars, or all the great lights which were in the firmament of heaven. Kolob is the greatest of all the Kokobim that thou hast seen, because it is nearest unto me." Close quote. By way of further explanation, Hieroglyphic said, Joseph Smith taught that there are various channels through which the glory and power of God are manifested. In other words, there is an organization of light in the cosmos. The sun, as the center of our solar system, is one of the basic channels through which the spirit or glory of Christ is manifested to this earth. The sun does not derive its light and power directly from Christ, however, but through a series of spheres that go back to Kolob. The book of Abraham states that the sun receives its light from Kolob through the medium of Kae-e-vanrash, the governing power which governs 15 other fixed planets or stars, and Kae-e-vanrash receives its light through the medium of other stars that receive their light from Kolob, the great governing body of this stellar system that stands next in government and power to the sphere on which God dwells. Close quote. George Reynolds adds that we learn through Abraham's vision that the great planets spoken of in the preceding verses, that is Abraham 3, 1-3, control all others in their revolutions, or in other words, are the centers around which the others revolve. As the moon revolves around the earth, and the earth with the other primary and secondary planets belonging to this solar system revolve around the sun, so has the sun a center around which it, with all its earths and moons, revolves, while this grand center has a governing planet also, a sun or world around which it, with all its attendant systems of suns and worlds, revolves, and so on until we reach to Kolob, the nearest unto the throne of God, which is the grand center, which governs all the suns and systems of suns, which belong to the same order as our earth, and those that move with it. Close quote. Facsimile 2, figure 1, tells us that Kolob is the first in government of all other worlds of the same order. The same order refers to the celestial spirit worlds of this universe that God the Father created in his generation. All these celestial spirit worlds receive their light from and through Kolob, as we're told in Facsimile 2, figure 5, saying, Enish-go-on-dosh, this is one of the governing planets also, and is said by the Egyptians to be the sun, and to borrow its light from Kolob through the medium of Kae-e-vanrash, which is the grand key, or, in other words, the governing power which governs 15 other fixed planets or stars, as Flois, or the moon, the earth, and the sun in their annual revolutions. This planet receives its power through the medium of Floisis, or Hakokobim, the stars represented by the numbers 22 and 23, receiving light from the revolutions of Kolob. Close quote. So, wow, that's a pretty big mouthful of information. The bottom line is that all these orbs borrow their light from Kolob, the greatest of all the stars. It had to be created first in order, closest to, and in the likeness of the celestial throne of God during the spirit creation, to govern and give its light to all those stars or planets of the same order. Kolob had to be the first world of the spirit creation in this generation so that it could be the source of this governing light. During the physical creation, Kolob became the spirit world within this earth, as I have alluded to before and will explain in more detail during my next podcast. In other words, in this podcast, we're talking about Kolob as the first world of the spirit creation, and in my next podcast I will explain in detail why Kolob is also the spirit world within this earth. So for now, you're just going to have to take it on faith that Kolob is the spirit world within this earth. But if we assume that that's the case, based on what we've studied this far, and we know that the creation of Kolob as a spirit world occurred first in time, then Kolob became this source or channel of light. However, since the time of Kolob's physical creation, it has not been a source of light and government to the universe, because the earth and everything on it fell to the status of a telestial world with the fall of Adam in the Garden of Eden, as explained by Joseph Fielding McConkie, saying, "This text," that is Doctrine and Covenants, section 101, 24 to 25, affirms that when Adam fell, the whole earth fell, including everything in the plant and animal kingdoms. Prior to the fall of Adam, there was neither death nor corruption of any sort in these kingdoms or in any other place in the world that Adam inhabited." Close quote. Again, the point of this is to show that the scriptural reference to Kolob as the first creation relates to its spirit creation and not its physical creation. Thus, Kolob was a source of light after the spirit creation, but not after its physical creation, when this earth fell and became the most wicked telestial world among all the physical worlds that are the workmanship of God's hands, as we're told in Moses 7:36, saying, "Wherefore I can stretch forth mine hands and hold all the creations which I have made, and mine eye can pierce them also. And among all the workmanship of mine hands, there has not been so great wickedness as among thy brethren." Close quote. However, and fortunately, Kolob will rise from the worst of the worst in the resurrection to become the best of the best in celestial glory and status, as we're told by Orson Pratt, who said, "The Lord will make this earth one of the most glorious habitations, inasmuch as the people will prepare themselves for it, one of the most glorious habitations that can be given unto men. It will be peopled by immortal beings throughout eternity. But before that, it will have to die. The earth will have to pass away, the same as our bodies do, and the dust thereof be mingled in a chaotic form. But that same being who organized the earth will again speak, and eternity will again hear his voice, and the materials of our earth will come together again, and when it unites them in one and forms them into a world, it will be a glorious world." Close quote. Joseph Fielding Smith reaffirms all this, saying, "The earth on which we dwell is filling the destiny assigned to it in the beginning. The final destiny of the earth will come following this season of wickedness, and after the earth dies and receives the resurrection, it will be crowned with celestial glory and take its proper place prepared for it in the heavens." Close quote. Thus we see that the spirit of Kolob was created as the great governing star of this universe, that it fell at the time of the fall after the physical creation, and it will rise in the resurrection to become the great governing star once again. The same can be said of Jesus Christ. He was the first and greatest of all God's spirit creations, and then he was born in mortality on this earth to descend below all things, that he might rise above all things to his former glory, as stated in Doctrine and Covenants, section 88:6, saying, "He that ascendeth up on high, as also he descended below all things, in that he comprehended all things, that he might be in all, and through all things, the light of truth." Close quote. Obviously, it's no coincidence that Christ was born on this earth and that he and Kolob follow identical paths after both were created first in their specific order or class during the spirit creation. The connection exists between Kolob and Christ because Kolob is a type for Jesus Christ, as we're told by Joseph Fielding McConkie, who said, "When Abraham was learning about Kolob, he was really learning about Christ. For Kolob is the similitude of Christ, and the stars are in the likeness of the spirits. We are told that Kolob was the first created, the nearest to the throne of God, and thus the greatest of all the stars. Kolob is described as being after the manner, or in the likeness of God, as being first in government, and as governing all those of the same order. Though there are many great ones near it, all receive their light from Kolob, and it is Kolob, we are told, that holds the key of power. In virtually every detail, Kolob is described in the same prophetic language that is used to describe Christ." Close quote. Based on the very close connection between Kolob and Christ, we can reach the following conclusion. Since Christ was the first spirit child born to God during the spirit creation, Kolob was the first world of spirit that God created during the same spirit creation. The manner in which time is measured or reckoned on Kolob during the premortal existence further confirms that Kolob was the first world of the spirit creation rather than the first world of the physical creation. Abraham 3:4 states that the Lord said unto me by the Urim and Thummim, that Kolob was after the manner of the Lord, according to its times and seasons, in the revolutions thereof, that one revolution was a day unto the Lord, after this manner of reckoning, it being 1,000 years, according to the time appointed unto that whereon thou standest. This is the reckoning of the Lord's time, according to the reckoning of Kolob." Close quote. You cannot fail to see the connection between Kolob and this earth, since there is a direct correlation between Kolob time in the premortal existence after the spirit creation and earth time after the physical creation and the fall of Adam. Hiram Andrus makes the connection, saying, Abraham's account of the creation actually starts with his vision of Kolob and the stellar system governing that great sphere. Not only does Abraham indicate that the earth is a part of that great system, but he associates it directly with Kolob during the period of its creation. He also states that during the creation and for a period of time thereafter, the earth had the same schedule of time as Kolob. Of Kolob's schedule of time, Abraham wrote, "The Lord said unto me that Kolob was after the manner of the Lord, according to its times and seasons in the revolutions thereof, that one revolution was a day unto the Lord, after his manner of reckoning, it being 1,000 years according to the time appointed unto that sphere whereon thou standest." Close quote. Abraham 3:4 necessarily refers to the reckoning of the Lord's time in premortality before the earth's physical creation. Ergo, we're talking about Kolob as a spirit world, which is identified in the same chapter as the first world of what therefore had to be the spirit creation. Joseph Fielding McConkie said, "The measurement of time as known to us in our premortal estate was very different than known to us in this mortal world. Eons, as we measure time, were involved in our preparation prior to coming to this earth. Abraham told us that Kolob, the planet nearest to that upon which God resides, was after the manner of the Lord, according to its times and seasons in the revolutions thereof." Close quote. Kolob operated according to celestial time in the premortal existence as stated in the explanation to Figure 1 in Facsimile 2, saying, "The measurement according to celestial time, which celestial time signifies 1 day to a cubit." Close quote. It seems a little bit unusual that in this explanation of Figure 1 we're told that the measurement of the time associated with Kolob, that is celestial time, is also associated with a cubit, which is a measurement of length of distance. That's not unusual, however, when you recognize that the time reckoning on Kolob is also related to its distance from the center or the throne of God on his celestial planet. That's why we have both this idea of time and length that are connected to each other, or time and distance, because the further away you get from Kolob, the time reckoning changes, and when you approach Kolob, then you get this one day is equal to the Lord's time. Hiram Andrus explains to us a little bit more about the premortal reckoning of time for Kolob that is based on celestial time, saying, in its revolutions as a great governing sphere, Kolob's time is based upon celestial time. There is a system of celestial time, and below this there are other systems based upon the speed of rotation of the given planet or star. Joseph Smith therefore gave an affirmative reply to the question, is not the reckoning of God's time, angels' time, prophets' time, and man's time according to the planet on which they reside? God explained to Abraham that Kolob was after the manner of the Lord, according to its times and seasons in the revolutions thereof, that one revolution was a day unto the Lord, after his manner of reckoning. In comparing the time schedule of Kolob to that of the earth, Joseph Smith wrote, one day in Kolob is equal to 1,000 years, according to the measurement of this earth. The earth, therefore, revolves 365,250 times, counting its revolutions during leap years, while Kolob is rotating but once. Close quote. Facsimile 2, figure 1, confirms that among all the celestial spirit worlds that God created, Kolob was the first creation whose time in premortality was reckoned by celestial time after the manner of the Lord. Celestial time is a premortal time, which means that in figure 1 of Facsimile 2, the image of Kolob must also be a premortal image, which George Reynolds alludes to when he talks about the time before the foundations are laid for the creation of this physical earth, saying, with the gods, the unit of the measurement of time is one of the days of Kolob, or 1,000 years of our years, which celestial time signifies one day to a cubit, or that as one Kolob's days is the unit of celestial time, so the cubit is the unit of celestial measurement, by which the size of the worlds are measured when the foundations thereof are laid, by which the distances of the suns and planets are regulated, and all the creations of the holy ones are controlled. Close quote. In Facsimile 2, figure 1, Joseph Smith identified Kolob as the first creation and the last pertaining to the measurement of time. Once again, we see a direct connection between the celestial time of Kolob as the first world of the spirit creation with the telestial time of this earth as the last world of the physical creation. Joseph Fielding Smith talks about this, saying, let me call your attention also to the statement in the book of Abraham 5:13, which tells us that until the time of Adam, this earth was on celestial time, and Adam had not received his time of reckoning until the fall. Before that, this earth was governed by celestial time. What are we told is celestial time? Celestial time, which is God's reckoning. Close quote. Bruce R. McConkie reminds us about the telestial nature of this earth since the fall, saying, this earth, according to the divine plan, is passing through a mortal or temporal existence of 7 millenniums or 7,000 years. During the first 6 of these, covering a total period of 6,000 years from the time of the fall of Adam, conditions of carnality, corruption, evil, and wickedness of every sort have prevailed upon the earth. Wars, death, destruction, and everything incident to the present telestial state of existence have held sway over the earth and all life on its face. Close quote. When Adam fell, the earth and its inward spirit, Kolob, both fell from the presence of God. At that point, the earth's reckoning of time changed from Kolob's celestial time to the earth's fallen telestial time. Now notice we get both a difference in the measurement of time and also the measurement of distance from God's celestial planet. That gives us back to this thought of the cubit and the measurement of time coming together. Hiram Andrus explains what happened at the fall of Adam, saying, as a result of the transgression of Adam, the earth was removed from the state it initially occupied under the immediate law of Kolob and was placed under a different system of time. This may have been accomplished by an actual change in its location in the cosmos, as implied in statements quoted in the previous chapter. In further support of this view, a lead article in the Times and Seasons, the official church newspaper, said in 1842, the earth no longer, at the transgression of Adam, retained its standing in the presence of Jehovah, but was hurled into the immensity of space, and there to remain till it has filled up the time of its bondage to sin and Satan. But, says one, wherein did the sin of man affect the whole creation? We answer that Adam was placed in the garden, or capital of the whole earth, and power was given unto him to sway his scepter over all things upon the earth. Therefore, when he fell from the presence of the Lord, the whole of his dominions fell also. Close quote. Brigham Young said the same thing with the addition of other details, saying, when the earth was framed and brought into existence, and man was placed upon it, it was near the throne of our Father in heaven. And when man fell, though that was designed in the economy, there was nothing about it mysterious or unknown to the gods. They understood it all. It was all planned. But when man fell, the earth fell into space and took up its abode in this planetary system, and the sun became our light. This is the glory the earth came from, and when it is glorified, it will return again unto the presence of the Father, and it will dwell there. And these intelligent beings that I am looking at, if they are worthy of it, will dwell upon this earth. Close quote. The explanation given for Facsimile 2, Figure 1, also states that God created Kolob as a world of spirit nearest to the celestial or residence of God in heaven, because Kolob was the most inherently intelligent of all the spirit worlds organized by God the Father. I talked about this intelligence, or the light or truth of intelligence, before during my podcast from September 21 of 2025, so you can go back and check that out. But by way of quickie reminder, Parley P. Pratt taught that these eternal, self-existing elements possess in themselves certain inherent properties or attributes in a greater or less degree, or, in other words, they possess intelligence adapted to their several spheres. Close quote. Let me also quote what B.H. Roberts had to say about this eternally existing and uncreated intelligence, saying, it is revolting to reason, as it is shocking to piety, to think that God, of his own free will, created some men not only inclined to wickedness, but desperately so inclined, while others he, of his own volition, created with dispositions naturally inclined toward goodness. On the other hand, under the conception of the existence of eternal intelligence in men, who, by the inherent nature of them, are of various degrees of intelligence and moral quality, yet all capable of advancement and improvement, and alike in their eternity and their freedom. Close quote. Getting back to this proximity between Kolob and God's celestial residence, we're told in Abraham 3:16 that, if two things exist, and there be one above the other, there shall be greater things above them. Therefore, Kolob is the greatest of all the cocoa bean that thou hast seen, because it is nearest unto me. Close quote. B.H. Roberts has said, there are many great stars called governing ones, one of which rises preeminent above the others, nearest the throne of God, and is called Kolob. This great star constitutes the grand center of our universe, around which all other great stars revolve, or by which they are governed in their movements or receive controlling force, and thence from this great central governing star, in ever-widening circles revolve countless worlds and world groups, with their respective central suns, in bewildering yet orderly magnificence and splendor. Close quote. So let me add just one more quote from Brigham Young, even though it feels like we're plowing some old ground here on the subject of intelligence. He said, "There is an eternity of matter. Astronomers estimate that there is between us and the nearest fixed star matter enough from which to organize millions of Earths like this. There is an eternity of matter, and it is all acted upon and filled with a portion of divinity. Matter is to exist. It cannot be annihilated. Eternity is without bounds, and is filled with matter, and there is no such place as empty space, and matter is capacitated to receive intelligence." Close quote. Now, I know I've been talking about that before, and it kind of keeps coming up. It's very intriguing to me, and so you're just going to have to put up with my particular interest in this idea, this concept of intelligences and intelligence. But from these statements about intelligence and what we already know about the order of creation, Kolob had to be the first world that God created during the Spirit creation because it possessed the most intelligence from among the mineral kingdom at the time of the Spirit creation. And so for more on this order of creation, check out my podcast from September 21 of 2025. After God first created Kolob as the most intelligent of all spirit worlds, nearest to his own celestial residence or celestial kingdom, God created other spirit worlds of lesser intelligence at increasing distances from his heavenly throne, according to the lesser measure of their intelligence and capacity for enlargement. Hiram Andrus talks about these several qualities of Kolob in its premortal state after he quotes Abraham 3:15-19, which states, "In the above quotation, 3 points are of special significance. First, Abraham was told that organized life exists, one system above another, without end. To him, God said, 'If 2 things exist and there be one above the other, there shall be greater things above them.' Second, God then applied this principle of gradation to the systems of life existing under the government of Kolob. He said to Abraham, concerning the organized spheres in this great system, 'Therefore, Kolob is the greatest of all the Kokobim, or stars, that thou hast seen, because it is nearest to me.' Third, there was a gradation of organized intelligences or spirits in the pre-earth state." Close quote. In a separate statement from the same text, Brother Andrus adds that just as there are noble and great spirits whom God appoints to be his rulers, there are also governing spheres in the universe which govern and control the many worlds he has created. These orbs exist, as Abraham's vision indicates, on a graduated scale, upward in glory and power, until they arrive at Kolob. Close quote. These teachings are why we have, and sometimes sing, but not too often, the LDS hymn called "If You Could Hie to Kolob." I don't think we sing this song that much because, frankly, nobody gets it. The word hie, spelled H-I-E, means to go quickly. So it's a song about going quickly to Kolob in its resurrected state as our celestial kingdom. The title would actually make perfect sense also if the word was high, spelled H-I-G-H, but of course that would be grammatically incorrect and would sound a little bit weird. But the idea would be that we would want to ascend up to where Kolob is nearest the throne of God. So maybe we can talk to the committee working on the new LDS hymns and suggest a name change to "If You Could Hi to Kolob." What do you think? Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to go for that. Frankly, I'm not sure it's going to make it in the new hymnal, but we'll just have to wait and see. So that just goes to show you why I'm a podcaster and not a lyricist. And speaking of which, let me quickly, or hi, to complete my discussion of Kolob's proximity to God's throne by saying that the lowest mineral intelligence of this creation became the spirit world furthest away from the throne of God. But even that last world of the spirit creation possessed and possesses a measure of intelligence and life. That least of all worlds was then clothed upon with physical element by Jehovah as the first world of the physical creation. Based on the foregoing, and in conclusion, all these concepts teach us that Kolob was in fact the first world of the spirit creation, and it did in fact become the spirit world within this physical earth that I will talk about in more detail during my next podcast. So until then, thanks for watching, listening, sharing, and subscribing, and thanks also to Jen and Kristen for all their help. I'll see you next time on Unveiling Jesus Christ.